Chelsea tend to get a lot of hate when it comes to the signing of young players, but the signing of Honest Ahanor might be the guy that changes your mind. But there's so many different aspects of Honest's game that I actually like. The first one being how strong he actually is in his duels. You guys can see this graphic on the screen here. For such a young kid, winning over 67% of his defensive duels is a joke. And look at the volume in his defensive duels. He averages over 8.8 defensive duels per 90, which is extremely high. But more importantly, look at where his duels are taking place. You guys can see a lot on those wider channels, which is very important considering the way Xabi Alonso wants his wider centre-backs, which we'll discuss. Now, when it comes to a back three system, your wide centre-backs have to be very comfortable defending those wider areas and those channels. Honest Ahanor is that guy for those certain situations, and you guys can see, because he's almost that left back / left centre back hybrid, when he does get pulled that wide, it's not a situation or zones which necessarily phase him. But more importantly, we've seen Xabi Alonso's use of his centre-backs in the opening day against Fulham. How aggressive were the crowd? How aggressive was the likes of Levi Colwill? That is what Honest thrives in. You guys can see there's so many situations where he pulls out outside the back three, pushes on into those midfield areas when he's facing an attacker. He's so comfortable doing that. He's very aggressive in terms of his approach when he's defending, which has its positives, but it also has its negatives. And the negatives being, because Honest Ahanor is very aggressive in terms of his approach, when the ball, let's say, is in that middle of the park, he does go in with quite a lot of force, quite a lot of speed, and at times he cannot decelerate quick enough, which means he faces the marker, or let's say the player on the ball very quickly. Because he goes in with so much force, at times he gives away fouls, and at times it means, because he cannot slow down quick enough, the attacking player can turn in very easily, because Honest Ahanor's force, let's say, is all one way, and he just can't shift across quick enough. But saying that, Honest Ahanor, in terms of his physicality, in terms of his explosiveness, is top notch. When he's in those situations where he obviously has to defend and run back, he can do it. His recovery pace is sensational. Another thing that I absolutely love about his game is his proactiveness in possession. You guys can see this example on the screen here. Atalanta are building up in their typical back three system, and he's the wide left centre back. The ball comes across to him. He makes that pass to the wide Atalanta player on the left hand side, but he doesn't stand still, which is the key. He makes that run beyond the guy on the ball into that left, say, half space. That's exactly what you want from your wider centre-backs. That's exactly what you want from your centre-backs in that back three system. And that's exactly what Xabi Alonso needs in those wider areas. And he could be a very good, let's say, understudy to someone like Levi Colwill, even though his strengths are slightly different. But like you would expect, for such a young kid, there's obviously going to be areas of his game that he could look to develop. One of them being his positional discipline. At times, he does get dragged out too easily when stepping up to press, which obviously leaves space in behind. And another thing that I think he has to work on is, at times when he's facing up against an attacking player, he loves to bait them in terms of actually taking them on. And he relies a lot on his recovery pace to obviously get the ball back. But you guys know, coming into the Premier League, or coming into a very physical league, where plays are very quick, especially in those wider areas, maybe that might be something that he has to think about a bit more, making that step up. Now, another area of his game that I believe he could work on is his aerial ability. I don't think he's the best in the air, but naturally he's still a young kid. As he develops, as he gets smart in terms of how he goes into his aerial duels, that would obviously improve. And he's still only 18. He still probably has room to grow, which could be obviously help his aerial duel success rate. Another thing that I believe that he could slightly tweak is that, like I said, he's very aggressive in terms of the way he goes into duels, but his approach in terms of going into the duel at times could slightly improve. He goes into duels at times in like a 50-50 stance, and he's trying to get them to go into those wider areas, which is very comfortable in. But listen, we know that's not always going to work. Can he be slightly smarter in that aspect of things? Hopefully. And those are just areas of his game that will obviously take it up another level. But Chelsea are getting a top young talent. Someone that you could argue is tailor-made for the Xabi Alonso system. And it'll be very interesting to see what Chelsea actually do with him going into the season, because I think there's obviously a potential of him being loaned out, which would obviously make a lot of sense considering the fact that Chelsea are not in Europe. One less competition that you can obviously rotate such a young kid. And we know minutes are obviously going to be very important, because he's developing very nicely in Italy, and he obviously has a very big future. But what I would say is he's tailor-made for the Premier League when you're looking at his aggressiveness and his style of play. And I'm very jealous of this signing, I'll be honest, guys. Chelsea are getting a top young player. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back soon.